Let's start with one of the strangest courtship practices you've probably never heard of: bundling. You want to get to know each other, spend some quality time together, but your parents are watching your every move. What do? You bundle. This was a custom where a young man and woman were allowed to spend the night together in the same bed. But there's a catch. They were fully clothed, and often a big wooden board, called a bundling board, was placed right down the middle of the bed to keep things strictly platonic. Sometimes the woman would even be sewn into a special bundling bag, which was basically a giant sack tied at the neck, leaving only her head exposed. The idea was to allow couples to talk and develop an emotional connection without getting physical. It was a way to conserve firewood and candles, since the whole family often slept in one room anyway. Parents actually encouraged it. They saw it as a practical way to supervise courtship. Can you imagine your parents suggesting that? "Hey honey, why don't you and your date go lie down for a bit?" Of course, you can probably guess what happened next. Despite the boards and bags, human nature is, well, human nature. Unintended pregnancies were not exactly uncommon, and many couples who bundled ended up at the altar a little sooner than planned. Religious leaders were horrified. They preached against it, calling it a gateway to sin. But bundling remained incredibly popular, especially in rural areas in Europe and even early America. It was just too practical to give up. So next time you think of medieval romance, picture two people awkwardly trying to have a conversation while tucked into bed with a literal barrier between them. Alright, moving on from supervised sleepovers to what was on the dinner plate. If you wanted to win someone's heart in the Middle Ages, you didn't just write them a poem. You cooked them a very specific and frankly, very bizarre meal. Medieval people were huge believers in mood foods, ingredients that they thought could stir up feelings of love and passion. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, ginger, and saffron weren't just for flavor. They were believed to heat the body and in turn ignite the passions. These weren't just random superstitions. Physicians at the time wrote detailed manuals, basically love food cookbooks, that blended medical theory with folklore. They believed the body's humors needed to be balanced, and certain foods could stimulate the right kind of energy for romance and, importantly, fertility. These romantic feasts were a staple at weddings. A wedding banquet wasn't just a celebration. It was a strategic culinary event designed to ensure the new couple would be happy, healthy, and produce heirs as quickly as possible. Guests would feast on spiced meats and sweet wines, all chosen to get everyone in a loving and celebratory mood. The belief in these foods was so strong that the church actually banned certain ingredients during periods of fasting, like Lent. Things like rich meats and hot spices were considered too stimulating for a time of quiet reflection and were strictly off-limits. It's wild to think that a pinch of pepper could be seen as a threat to your spiritual purity, but that's how deeply food and romance were intertwined. So, if a medieval suitor offered you a plate of spiced liver, they weren't being weird. They were being romantic. Now, if you thought bundling and love foods were strange, buckle up, because we're heading into the wedding night. For medieval nobles, getting married wasn't just about saying, "I do." The marriage wasn't considered legally and officially complete until the union was, well, you know. And here's the crazy part. They often weren't alone when it happened. This practice was known as the witnessed consummation. After the wedding feast, the bride and groom would be escorted to their bedchamber by a procession of family, friends, and high-ranking guests. This wasn't just a party, it was a formal ceremony. The priest might bless the bed, and guests would hang around offering jokes and encouragement. In some cases, key witnesses, like parents or officials, would literally stand in the room or just outside the door to verify that the marriage was sealed. In other scenarios, the couple would be left alone. But the next morning, witnesses would come in to inspect the bedsheets for physical evidence. It sounds incredibly invasive and awkward, but for the aristocracy, marriage was a political and economic alliance. It was a contract, and proof of consummation was required to make that contract binding. A lot was at stake: alliances, inheritances, and land titles. There were even etiquette manuals written about how to properly conduct oneself during this bizarre ceremony. Failure to perform or any procedural misstep could be grounds for an annulment. Imagine the pressure. This tradition highlights how different their concept of privacy was. For the nobility, the personal was deeply political, and even the most intimate moments were a matter of public record. It really puts a whole new spin on the term wedding night jitters, doesn't it? Finally, let's look to the stars. Once a couple was officially married, the next big focus was producing children, especially a male heir. And medieval couples didn't leave this to chance. They turned to a powerful combination of astrology, religion, and folklore to plan the perfect moment for conception. This was serious business. They believed the cosmos had a direct influence on fertility and the health of a child. Astrologers were often hired by wealthy families to create detailed conception schedules. These charts would pinpoint the most auspicious times to try for a baby based on the phases of the moon, the alignment of the planets, and the zodiac signs. The waxing moon, for example, was seen as a time of growth and was considered ideal for conception. The church calendar also played a massive role. The church forbade marital relations on a huge number of days: Sundays, feast days, saints' days, and the entire seasons of Lent and Advent. This created a complex puzzle for couples trying to time things right. They had to find a day that was astrologically favorable and not prohibited by the church. The details got even more specific. Everything from the time of day, the direction the bed was facing, and even the weather was thought to influence the outcome. There were also all sorts of strange folk beliefs about how to choose the gender of your child. One popular theory suggested that to conceive a boy, a man should tie off his left testicle during the act. It sounds ridiculous to us, but these were widely accepted ideas. This obsession with timing shows just how much anxiety surrounded fertility and lineage. In a world with high infant mortality and immense pressure to produce heirs, people used every tool they had, from prayer to planetary charts, to try and control their destiny. It was a world where the bedroom was governed by the calendar, the cosmos, and a whole lot of hope. Think medieval romance was all chivalry and flowery poems? Think again. The truth is way weirder and more awkward than any fairy tale. Let's dive into the bizarre side of love and relationships from the Middle Ages. First up, forget diamonds. The real bling was magical underwear. People genuinely believed certain clothes could bring them luck in love. They wore special belts called girdles of Venus, often inscribed with prayers or symbols, hoping to boost fertility or stay healthy. Amulets were also a big deal, filled with things like ground gems, weird animal parts, or written verses. You could even pay a member of the clergy to bless your lucky charm, mixing faith with a heavy dose of superstition. The rich had fancy, ornate versions, while everyday people crafted their own. Some folks were so serious about it, they wouldn't even get together with their partner unless both were wearing their protective gear. Talk about a mood killer. Now, picture this: your relationship problems being settled in a courtroom, publicly. In some extreme cases, if a husband couldn't perform his marital duties, a woman could request an annulment. But to prove it, the court would conduct an investigation. This involved humiliating medical exams and even supervised demonstrations to see if the claim was valid. Can you imagine the gossip? Some men would chug herbal remedies or tonics, desperate to pass the test. These trials could drag on for months, making everyone involved a target for public ridicule. Even if you were telling the truth, the whole process was designed to be deeply embarrassing. Next, let's talk about the ultimate hypocrisy. While the church was preaching about moral purity, some religious authorities were quietly profiting from a very different kind of business. Take 12th century London, for example. The Bishop of Winchester actually owned regulated entertainment houses in an area called Southwark. The workers there had to follow strict rules, wearing specific clothes, working. The money earned from this business then helped fund the construction of churches and religious festivals. It was a massive contradiction that somehow lasted for centuries before reformers finally put a stop to it. So, what about family planning? Medieval ideas for birth control were, to put it mildly, bizarre and often dangerous. People would wear charms made from animal organs, hoping to prevent conception. They drank potions containing toxic metals or herbs which could do serious harm. Other so-called methods included sneezing at the right moment or using strange herbal mixtures. Some even tried using fruit or other natural materials as physical barriers. The few methods that might have actually worked were condemned by authorities as sinful or unhealthy. So, what does all this weirdness tell us? It shows a fascinating clash between religious faith and human curiosity. Medieval society was a strange mix of superstition, strict religious control, and very limited scientific knowledge. This combination created some truly absurd beliefs about love, attraction, and family. It proves that for centuries, people have been trying to figure out the mysteries of relationships, even if their methods seem completely wild to us today. It is a powerful reminder that the human desire to love and be loved has always been a complicated, messy, and sometimes very strange journey.